Today's topic is multiplying and dividing integers. So, two key ideas to remember when you're multiplying and dividing integers are that if you're multiplying and dividing integers with the same sign, both integers are either positive or both integers are negative, your answer will be positive. If you are multiplying or dividing integers and they have different signs, so one integer is positive and one integer is negative, your answer will be negative. So let's talk a little bit about why we see this pattern. Every math problem that we see is really just a math sentence, and we have to know how to interpret what is written there. So when we see a multiplication problem like 5 times 4, what we're really being asked to find is the total for 5 groups of 4. And if I draw that out, I end up with positive 20. Each group has 4 positives, so we have 20 positives. If I see a problem like 6 times negative 3, this is saying I have 6 groups of negative 3. So 6 groups with 3 negatives each gives me a total of negative 18. So when I see a problem like negative 3 times 2, I'm really being asked to find what's the opposite of having 3 groups of 2. Well, 3 groups of 2, as we can see here, is 6. The opposite of that is negative 6. Here, we're being asked to find the opposite of 2 groups of negative 7. 2 groups of negative 7 would be negative 14. The opposite would be positive 14. So we have this pattern. Every time we're multiplying 2 positives or 2 negatives, we end up with a positive answer. If we have 1 positive and 1 negative, we end up with a negative answer. One way to remember these rules is to draw yourself a tic-tac-toe board, and down this diagonal here, we can put positives, and in all of the other spots, we're going to put negative signs. So 3 positives down the diagonal, everywhere else a negative. And this little chart is a way to remember these rules, because any way you go, it's a multiplying and dividing integers rule. A positive times a negative gives me a negative. A negative times a positive gives me a negative. A negative times a negative gives me a positive. It also works vertically. Positive times a negative is a negative. Negative times a positive is a negative. 2 negatives would give me a positive. Diagonally, it'll also work. A positive times a positive is positive. A negative times a positive is negative. And the rules for multiplying and dividing are the same, so that will also work for your division rules. So let's try a couple here. So the first thing I'm going to do when I see a multiplication problem like this is just multiply the absolute value here of my integers. So 1 times 9 is 9. Then I can go back and say, well, they were both the same sign. If they're the same sign, my answer is positive. This is a division problem. I've got negative 49 divided by 7. Initially, I'm just going to divide the absolute values of these. 49 divided by 7 is 7. Then I'll go back and look at my problem. These guys had different signs. Different signs means my answer is negative. 21 divided by negative 3. Well, 21 divided by 3 is 7. Since they have different signs, my answer is negative. So negative 7. Here's a unique one. 0 divided by negative 2. Well, if I have 0 to start with, and I'm dividing it into any sort of group, I'm going to have 0. 4 times negative 6. Well, 4 times 6 gives us 24, and since we have different signs, our answer will be negative. Here we're multiplying 3 numbers, so I'm going to start with the first 2. Negative 3 times negative 5, well, these two give me positive 15. positive 15 now times negative 4 to get my final answer gives me negative 60. The last thing we're going to do is look at some problems with exponents. So you guys have seen exponents before, but some of our exponents here have parentheses around them and some of them don't, and that's an important distinction. When the parentheses are around the number here, it's saying that the number is negative 8 and they want us to square it. So basically we're doing negative 8 times negative 8. 8 times 8 is 64. Since these guys have the same sign, I'm going to have positive 64. When there aren't parentheses, it's a different problem though. This one is not asking me to multiply negative 5 3 times or cube negative 5. This one's actually saying I want the opposite of 5 to the third power. The difference is this one does not have parentheses. So I want the opposite of whatever 5 cubed is. So 5 cubed, 5 times 5 times 5 gives me 125. And the opposite of that would be negative 125. So this is my answer. Here I've got parentheses again. So this is saying negative 2 to the fourth power. So this time the negative is part of my integer. So I'm multiplying negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Well, these first two negative 2's give me 4. These second two negative 2's give me 4. And then 4 times 4 gives me 16. So 16 here is my final answer. And this last one, now the negative is not part of the integer. It's asking for the opposite of 7 squared. So 7 times 7 is the problem I'm doing, and that gives me 49. And the opposite of that is negative 49. So because they're asking me for the opposite of this, right at the end here, I take my answer and change it to its opposite.